June 25, 1963. Pacific Ocean approximately 400 miles west of San Diego. Dawn breaks pale and quiet over the USS Granville's hull. The sea is calm, unnervingly so. Its surface glassy like an enormous lung-holding breath. A faint breeze carries the smell of metal and salt and something else. Something synthetic that burns faintly in the throat. Below deck, Seaman Second Class. Robert Bobby Klein buttons his shirt with trembling fingers. He's 23, fresh from Kansas, and proud to serve. He has no idea what he's about to breathe in. Report to topside. Operation Autumn Gold commencing. The intercom crackles. No one knows what Autumn Gold means. It's just another code name, like so many others whispered through the corridors. SHAD, DTC test. Eager bell? The officers don't explain, and the men don't ask. Orders are orders. At 0600 hours, the deck crew assembles. They watch as a small Navy patrol boat approaches gray hull, unmarked, on board. Men in protective suits move like ghosts, sealed behind rubber and glass. They spray a fine mist into the wind, a glittering haze that drifts toward the ship and settles silently on metal, cloth, and skin. Bobby squints into the sunlight. Smells like vinegar, he mutters. Probably disinfectant. Someone replies. It isn't. Within the mist are Bacillus globigi, spores of bacterium chosen because it mimics anthrax in behavior, but is deemed harmless. At least, that's what the scientists at Deseret Test Center in Utah believe. In other trials, they use zinc cadmium sulfide, a compound that glows under ultraviolet light, useful for tracing dispersion patterns. No one tells the sailors what's in it. As the spray settles, the air grows thick, tasting faintly metallic. The men cough, laugh, light cigarettes. It feels routine. No alarms, no warnings. A few take photographs, smiling against the pale fog curling around their helmets. Above them, a helicopter circles lazily, filming everything. The footage will be classified for decades. By evening, a strange odor lingers in the corridors. Bobby notices it while cleaning near the ventilation system, a scent like wet paint and ozone. His throat itches. His eyes water. He mentions it to the medic, who shrugs. Probably sea mold. In the mess hall, the men joke about ghost gas and the Navy's new perfume. They have no idea they're part of Project SHAD, Shipboard Hazard and Defense, one of more than 100 secret tests carried out from 1962 to 1973. The goal to determine how biological and chemical agents would spread aboard naval vessels in case of Soviet attack. The next morning, the officers conduct decontamination drills. The crew hoses the decks, scrubs metal with bleach, and burns contaminated rags in drums. But the mist doesn't wash away completely. It seeps into the vents, the wiring, the men's clothes. Bobby sneezes blood for the first time that afternoon. Years later, he will remember the metallic taste of that morning more vividly than any battle. Back then, though, life goes on, ships depart, new tests begin, each one more secretive, more complex. The sailors sign non-disclosure papers, unaware of what they're swearing to. Some are told the tests involve weather studies. Others are told nothing at all. In July 1964, the USS Navarro and USS Tioga County participate in another test, Shady Grove. Again, aerosols are dispersed. This time, the men report nausea, dizziness, and rashes. The symptoms fade after a few days, and command logs them as environmental exposure. But exposure to what? No answers? Not yet. In 1968, Bobby is discharged. His lungs ache in cold weather. His skin blisters easily. The doctors call it unexplained dermatitis. By then, he's forgotten the mist, the code names, the faint vinegar scent, He marries, works at a shipyard, raises 2 daughters. Then the coughing begins again, dry, relentless, metallic tasting. And in the quiet of one night, he remembers the gray suits, the unmarked boats, the invisible haze curling across the deck under a rising sun. The years roll on. The war in Vietnam dominates headlines, and the Cold War tightens its invisible grip. Project SHAD and its silent twin, Project 112, vanish beneath layers of classified files, buried so deep that even most officers pretend they never existed. For men like Robert Klein, life becomes a quiet struggle. By 1972, he's 32, coughing blood more often than not. Doctors say it's bronchitis, then asthma, then maybe asbestos exposure from his shipyard job. But his chest x-rays show patterns no one can explain: tiny lesions, scattered like snowflakes across the lungs. At night, he dreams of mist-silver clouds that hover just above the deck, whispering through the vents. In March 1973, across the country in Maryland, a congressional aide named John Prentice stumbles upon a sealed report while reviewing naval expenditures. The document mentions chemical and biological vulnerability tests conducted on ships between 1962 and 1970. The signatures read, Department of Defense, Deseret Test Center, Fort Douglas, Utah. He brings it to his superior, who skims the first page and frowns. This never happened, the man says, sliding the folder back into the safe. 2 days later, Prentice is reassigned. Meanwhile, veterans begin to die quietly: heart failure, liver disease, aggressive cancers. Families notice patterns, but no one connects the dots. There are no records, no incident reports, no mention of Project SHAD on any service files. The men who participated were never officially part of it. In 1977, Bobby writes to the Department of the Navy, asking whether he may have been exposed to toxins during training exercises. He receives a polite, typed reply. No record of any hazardous testing aboard USS Granville S, Hull, or affiliated vessels. He folds the letter carefully and places it in a drawer. He never writes again. Across the Pacific, other sailors tell similar stories. On Guam, a man named Joseph Newman, once part of Test Copperhead, recalls being sprayed with a yellow haze while stationed on deck. His skin peeled for weeks. Doctors blamed tropical infections. In Hawaii, another veteran remembers seeing men in full suits releasing glowing dust over the ship while he stood unprotected. In the official archives, these tests have names that sound almost harmless: Autumn Gold, Shady Grove, Copperhead, Flower Drum, Fearless Johnny. But the substances weren't harmless. Some tests involved VX nerve agent simulants, sarin analogs, and bacteria like Serratia marcescens, known to cause pneumonia and urinary tract infections. Others used chemical tracers like zinc cadmium sulfide, now classified by the EPA as a potential carcinogen. Still, no one talks. The ocean keeps its secrets. By the 1980s, Project SHAD has disappeared entirely from institutional memory, but the men remain older, weaker, each carrying pieces of the truth like rusted fragments lodged under the skin. They form quiet networks through veterans' newsletters, trading symptoms and rumors. One letter reads, "I was on the Navarro. We were sprayed with something from a helicopter. I've had breathing problems ever since. Anyone else?" Responses come in from across the country, from Seattle, Pensacola, Kansas City. Dozens of sailors. Same ships, same years, same symptoms. In 1989, Bobby collapses while walking to his mailbox. His wife, Ellen, finds him kneeling on the gravel, gasping, blood seeping from his nose. At the hospital, they diagnose idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, unknown cause, irreversible. Before he dies that winter, he tells Ellen, It started on the ship. That missed. She doesn't understand what he means. Not yet. In the years that follow, she writes letters to senators, to the Navy, to anyone who will listen. No one responds. Project SHAD doesn't officially exist. They tell her the documents are sealed. The tests are unknown until 1994. That year, a retired Army scientist named Dr. Michael Kilpatrick leaks fragments of internal memos to a journalist at the Sacramento Bee. The headline reads, "Did the U.S. military test germs on its own sailors?" The Pentagon calls it a misunderstanding. Congress demands hearings. Veterans begin coming forward in droves, describing the same scenes: the mists, the suits, the silence. And suddenly, the ocean's secrets begin to rise. Washington, D.C., February 1998. A gray morning settles over the Capitol. Inside a narrow conference room deep within the Pentagon, a stack of faded folders lies on the table, edges curling like burned paper. Across their covers, one name repeats in red ink: Project SHAD. A young congressional investigator, Sarah Leland, opens the first file. She smells the musty scent of old chemicals, a mix of dust and laboratory air. Inside, she finds memoranda stamped top secret from 1963 through 1970, hand-signed orders authorizing open-air dissemination of simulant agents over naval vessels, island bases, and populated coastlines. She reads slowly, her hand trembling. Test 6910, Operation Flower Drum Objective: evaluate shipboard vulnerability to aerosolized agents BG, SM, and VX simulants. Target USS George Eastman, USS Navarro. Then, a typed annotation in the margin. Written decades earlier. Crew not to be informed. Observation to remain covert. Sarah's throat tightens. For decades, the government had denied the existence of these trials. Now, the evidence sits before her undeniable, signed, numbered, sealed under official insignia. The hearings begin that summer. A few reporters attend. Fewer cameras roll. War stories don't shock America anymore. Ellen Klein, now 54, sits in the second row. Her husband's photograph, a young sailor smiling beneath a Pacific sunrise, rests in her hands. When she testifies, her voice doesn't rise. It quivers like wind on paper. He believed in his country. He trusted them. But they used him as an experiment. A brief silence follows. Then the chairman clears his throat, thanking her for her courage. No apology follows. No admission of guilt. The Pentagon representative, Colonel James Paxton, reads a prepared statement. Project SHAD was designed to ensure national readiness in the event of biological warfare. All agents used were non-lethal simulants and presented no known long-term health risks. The veterans in the room exchange glances, disbelief mixed with quiet rage. One stands up, voice hoarse. Then why are we dying? No one answers. Outside, the air feels heavy. Rain begins to fall over Washington, soft, persistent, almost cleansing. But for the sailors who lived through those tests, the rain feels like memory returning, washing color into ghosts. In the following months, journalists begin tracing the paper trail backward through the Deseret Test Center archives, through naval medical files, through obscure shipping logs. They find references to over 134 tests under the combined umbrella of Project SHAD and Project 112, spanning the Pacific, Atlantic, and even parts of the mainland U.S. Substances included Bacillus globigi, BG anthrax simulant, Serratia marcescens, SM bacteria capable of causing infections, zinc cadmium sulfide, ZNCDS, a fluorescent tracer, later linked to respiratory issues, VX and sarin nerve agent simulants, chemical compounds released near Okinawa, Johnston Atoll, and the Marshall Islands. The scale is staggering. Thousands of sailors, dozens of ships, entire coastlines dusted with invisible safety tests. And yet, the official response remains muted. No criminal investigation, no reparations, only a promise that the Department of Defense will study potential health correlations. That study, quietly launched in 2002, will take years. Many of its subjects will die before seeing the results. Ellen keeps writing letters to newspapers, to senators, to anyone who might still care. She receives form replies, copies of press releases, sympathy but no answers. She begins to collect the testimonies of other widows, a patchwork archive of human evidence. Together, they build what the government would not, a record of truth. In one letter, a widow from Florida writes, "My husband was on the USS Navarro. He had the same cough, the same lesions. They said it was lung cancer, but he never smoked." In another, "They told me the tests were harmless. Then why did our son die at 19 from the same thing?" The stories multiply. Each name adds weight to the silence. By 2003, the Department of Veterans Affairs finally acknowledges Project SHAD publicly. For the first time in 40 years, the words appear on official paper. Yet the tone is clinical. Detached, limited testing. Exposure possible. No conclusive link to long-term illness. The truth sanitized again. Ellen watches the televised briefing that November. The camera pans across the podium. The flag. The suits. No apology. No faces of the men who coughed blood on steel decks under the Pacific sun. That night, she walks to the shoreline near her home in Oregon. The ocean stretches vast and gray, like the one her husband once sailed. She closes her eyes. For a moment, she hears it again. The faint hiss of a mist that never should have existed. Oregon coast, winter 2007. Waves collapse against the rocks in a slow, endless rhythm. Ellen walks the beach every morning now, collecting fragments the sea leaves behind shells, driftwood, bits of rusted metal. Sometimes she imagines one might have come from the Granville S hull, the ship where it all began. She keeps a small wooden box on her desk. Inside lie the letters from other widows, photocopies of declassified pages, and one photo, Bobby, 23, smiling under a sky that would soon turn toxic. That same year, a Freedom of Information Act request releases another trove of documents. Within them, one phrase appears again and again: no human subjects involved. But the test logs tell a different story. Crew rosters, dates, ship positions, recorded meteorological conditions, estimated exposure times. Everything meticulously noted, as though written by someone who understood precisely what they were doing. The more Ellen reads, the colder she feels. She can trace her husband's final illness through the language of bureaucracy, aerosol dissemination, simulant persistence, post-test decontamination. The words are clinical, precise, and utterly devoid of humanity. Elsewhere, investigative journalists begin piecing together the full scale of the program. Between 1962 and 1973, Project SHAD and Project 112 conducted tests across the Pacific, Caribbean, and American mainland. Nearly 6,000 service members were directly exposed. The agents included biological tracers, nerve agent simulants, and, in at least 12 instances, live pathogens. But there was something darker beneath even that. Some internal memos hinted that certain volunteer studies were performed to monitor human reaction to combined exposures, though no documentation of consent exists. The men were never told. The data was buried. The results, when found, were marked "Destroy" after review. In 2008, Congress finally holds a new round of hearings. By then, most of the original commanders are dead or too ill to testify. The only living senior scientist, Dr. Martin Delaney, appears via video link, frail, voice trembling. "We believed the simulants were harmless," he says. "We were testing containment, not lethality. We never intended harm." A congressman leans forward. "Did you inform the men serving on those ships?" Delaney hesitates, then whispers, "No, we couldn't." They needed to act naturally for the data to be valid. The room goes silent. For the first time, the phrase human subjects enters the congressional record in relation to Project SHAD. It feels like the smallest crack in a wall built of decades of denial. Outside the hearing chamber, Ellen meets other families' wives, sons, granddaughters of the sailors who inhaled the mist. Some bring photographs, others bring urns. A few just hold one another, unsure what justice would even look like after so many years. The veterans who remain alive are aging rapidly. Many live with chronic respiratory disease, neurological disorders, or cancers of unknown origin. The VA begins offering medical exams, but the process is buried in red tape. Claims are denied for insufficient evidence, records still missing. One survivor, Chief Petty Officer Thomas Riley, tells the New York Times, "They told us we were the line of defense, but we weren't defending anything. We were the test." By 2010, public awareness peaks briefly, then fades again beneath the noise of new wars. The world moves on. Only the families remain to keep the memory alive. Ellen decides to compile everything into an online archive, the SHAD files. She scans every document, every letter, every photograph. She uploads testimonies, names of ships, coordinates of tests. It's not an act of revenge. It's preservation. She writes in the site's introduction, "This isn't history. It's a warning. What we forget, we repeat." Visitors begin to leave messages, sailors' children, researchers, strangers who never knew such things had been done. One writes, "My father served on the Eastman. He used to wake up coughing. Thank you for giving his pain a name." At night, Ellen still hears the ocean. She wonders how many invisible clouds drifted across it unseen, unremembered, unaccounted for. And somewhere in Utah, at the former Deseret Test Center site, the old storage bunkers sit abandoned, sealed behind barbed wire and sand dunes. Inside, perhaps, are the final records still unreleased, the missing numbers, the unlogged trials, the names erased from rosters. The silence hums louder with each passing year. Utah Desert 2013. The Deseret Test Center is a graveyard now. The wind hums through rusted vents and broken fences. In one bunker, the air smells faintly of old disinfectant and dust, as if time itself still carries the residue of what was tested here. A historian named Daniel Kearns stands in the doorway, flashlight trembling in his hand. He's not a journalist or a soldier, just a graduate student chasing a thesis about military ethics during the Cold War. What he finds instead is a room full of ghosts. Rows of file cabinets stretch into the dark. Many drawers are empty, but a few still hold folders stamped with dull red letters, SHAD 112 evaluation data. The pages inside are half rotted, the ink blurred, but the words remain: USS Navarro, USS George Eastman, USS Granville S. Hall, in the margins, chemical formulas, hand-signed initials, and field notes scrawled in pencil. One page reads simply, weather optimal, crew exposure 47 min, behavior unaffected, decon completed. Daniel closes the file, breathing shallowly. The word exposure feels radioactive. He sends copies to Ellen's online archive. Within days, the community explodes with messages historians, veterans, families all reading the newly surfaced evidence. The documents confirm what many had suspected for decades. The government not only exposed thousands of its own sailors to chemical and biological agents, but continued to deny their suffering long after the tests ended. In 2015, under mounting pressure, the Department of Defense declassifies several hundred more pages. For the first time, the full scope of Project SHAD is visible. 134 confirmed tests between 1962 and 1973. 5 842 service members exposed to simulants or live agents. 28 ships and multiple land sites used as test environments. Agents included VX nerve simulants, sarin analogs, Bacillus globigi, Serratia marcescens, Coxiella burneti, and other pathogens. Medical monitoring described as non-essential. It's all there, clinical, methodical, monstrous in its calm precision. When Ellen reads the files, she doesn't cry anymore. She just prints them and adds them to the box. Her husband's face sits atop the pile, forever young, forever looking into a fog he never understood. That spring, she's invited to speak at the Naval War College. She hesitates at first, unsure if she can face the very institution that buried the truth. But she accepts. On the stage, she reads slowly. Clearly, my husband died for his country. Not in battle, not by enemy fire, but by his own command. I don't want revenge. I want remembrance. The room is silent. The officers, some young enough to be her grandchildren, shift uncomfortably in their seats. No one claps when she finishes. They only stand, as if to salute not her, but the dead. Afterward, one cadet approaches her. He says, "Ma'am, I didn't know this happened." Ellen nods gently. "That's why I came." In the following years, the SHAD files becomes part of public record. Cited in textbooks and documentaries, veterans finally receive limited compensation, too little, too late, but something tangible to mark that it was real. Yet for every file opened, others remain sealed. Many records were destroyed in 1975 under the label Routine Archival Purge. The full extent, the doses, the medical consequences, the experiment logs will never be known. Ellen passes away in 2019 at age 76. Her daughters scatter her ashes at sea, near where the Granville S hull once sailed. The water is calm, shimmering under a silver dawn. If you listen carefully, you might almost hear it, the low hum of an engine, the whisper of wind over steel, the sound of men breathing under a falling mist. The ocean has forgotten their names, but history finally remembers. Washington, D.C., Autumn 2022. In a quiet room of the National Archives, a small group gathers around a glass display case. Inside, under sterile light, rests a single declassified document, the 1963 authorization order for Project SHAD, Test 63-1 Operation Autumn Gold. The paper is yellowed, the ink fading, but one phrase remains legible. Objective: determine vulnerability of naval vessels to aerosolized agents under combat conditions. Human observation required. The words sit like a bruise on history. Among the visitors is Dr. Daniel Kearns, now a professor of military ethics. He watches in silence as students read the file that once lay forgotten in the Utah desert. Nearby, a small plaque bears a quote from Ellen Klein: "Truth delayed is truth denied." Her voice lingers in the hall, quiet but unyielding. Over the last decade, new research has confirmed what the victims long suspected. The so-called harmless simulants were anything but. Medical reviews by the Department of Veterans Affairs reveal that sailors involved in Project SHAD show significantly higher rates of respiratory failure, rare cancers, and neurological disorders compared to other naval cohorts from the same era. Many of the exposed men have already died too early, too painfully, too quietly. Those still alive testify in documentary interviews, their voices worn but steady. 1. Chief Petty Officer Thomas Riley, now 83, sits in his wheelchair before the camera. His breath rattles with every word. "We didn't sign up to be lab rats. We were sailors. We followed orders. But the ocean didn't kill us. Our own command did." He looks directly into the lens, eyes sharp despite the years, and if they did it once, they can do it again. That line becomes the centerpiece of a Netflix documentary released in 2023, Mist Over the Pacific. It reignites public outrage and brings long overdue attention to the forgotten program. Congress reopens the investigation for the third time. Declassified in full that same year, the final SHAD records expose additional horrors. Test ship personnel logs altered post-mission to omit names. Medical reports recommending follow-up observation for chronic effects, later ignored. Internal memos discussing psychological containment strategies to prevent crew suspicion. In one memo dated May 1965, a commander wrote, "Sailors exhibit mild anxiety post-exposure. Recommend framing operation as environmental readiness exercise. No disclosure necessary. The bureaucratic cruelty is staggering, as if secrecy itself was part of the experiment." By 2024, the U.S. and government issues an official acknowledgement of wrongdoing. No formal apology, no prosecution. Just acknowledgement, a statement read by the Secretary of Defense at a memorial service attended by families of the deceased. The men who served under Project SHAD did so without full knowledge of their circumstances. Their sacrifice contributed, however indirectly, to the advancement of our nation's defense readiness. We honor them today. The applause is hesitant, hollow. Many family members leave before it ends. Outside, the memorial's design stands stark, a curved wall of black granite engraved with the names of all known SHAD participants, nearly 6,000. When the wind moves through the plaza, the engraved letters shimmer faintly, as though breathing. Daniel runs his fingers across the stone, pausing over one name, Robert Klein. He remembers Ellen's emails, her relentless letters, the trembling scans of evidence she sent before her death. Everything began with her refusal to forget. He looks out toward the horizon. The sky is heavy, low, and colorless, the kind of sky that swallows light the way the ocean swallows sound. And beneath it, the question lingers: how many other files still lie buried in forgotten bunkers, still sealed under national security, still written in language designed to erase the human cost? How many more men breathed in the invisible? Johnston Atoll, present day. The Pacific stretches infinite and indifferent around the ruins of an abandoned U.S. base. Concrete blocks crumble under salt wind. The sea presses against the edges of the runway where aircraft once landed, bringing canisters labeled only with numbers, no markings, no names. The atoll has been silent for decades, yet the silence hums. Radiation sensors click faintly in the breeze. Seabirds circle above the rusted hangars. Beneath the waves, coral grows through twisted steel. The ocean has begun to reclaim what man tried to hide. Dr. Daniel Kearns stands on the cracked tarmac, camera in hand. He's filming the final sequence of his documentary, The Sea Remembers. Behind him, a small crew adjusts microphones, recording the sound of the wind, the soft hiss of the surf. He begins speaking softly, almost to himself. Between 1962 and 1973, these waters became the theater of invisible wars. Men sailed into clouds they could not see, following orders they could not question. They were told it was for defense, that the tests were safe, the agents harmless. But the body doesn't forget. The lungs don't forget. The sea doesn't forget. He pauses, watching waves roll over the coral. The tragedy of Project SHAD isn't just the sickness, or the lies, or the silence. It's the fact that for 40 years, the truth lay buried and no one thought to look. These were not casualties of combat. They were casualties of secrecy. As he speaks, the camera pans over the atoll, the skeletal towers, the scorched testing pads, the faded warning signs half buried in sand caution biological material area. Somewhere deep in the lagoon lies a sunken barge used during Operation Fearless Johnny. Officially, it was decontaminated. Unofficially, no one ever checked. The wind shifts. For a moment, the air carries a faint metallic tang, the same scent that once drifted over the decks of ships in 1963. It's probably just rust, Daniel tells himself. Probably. He looks down at the ocean, where sunlight refracts into 1,000 broken shards. Each shimmer feels like a fragment of memory of sailors scrubbing decks with bare hands, of officers signing orders in quiet rooms, of families waiting decades for the truth. Later, as the sun begins to sink, Daniel records his closing narration. The files are open now. The names are known. But justice, like the sea, is never still. It shifts, it erodes, it remembers. The men of Project SHAD were told to serve without question. They did. The question that remains is ours: who will we become if we forget them? He stops the recorder. Silence settles again, vast and final. Night falls over Johnston Atoll. The tide rises, washing over the cracked runway, swallowing the footprints, erasing every sign of the living. But the sea keeps the memory in its salt, in its depth, in its restless, endless motion. And somewhere, in the invisible currents that circle the earth, drift the particles of the experiments, the ashes of the men who breathed them, and the truths that took half a century to surface. Because nothing buried at sea stays buried forever. Between 1962 and 1973, under the guise of defense research, the U.S. military conducted 134 classified tests involving biological and chemical agents on more than 5,800 servicemen, often without their knowledge or consent. Many were exposed to compounds later proven harmful: Bacillus globigii, Serratia marcescens, zinc cadmium sulfide, and VX nerve simulants. The official narrative claimed these substances were harmless. Medical data decades later revealed abnormally high rates of respiratory failure, cancers, and chronic illnesses among participants. In 2002, the Pentagon confirmed the existence of Project SHAD and its parent program, Project 112. In 2013, partial declassification revealed the true scale of the operations. In 2024, the government issued limited acknowledgement, but still no formal apology. Most of the men who served in these tests never lived to see that day. Their families continue to seek recognition, compensation, and most of all, truth. Project SHAD remains one of the most haunting examples of Cold War secrecy turned inward, an experiment where the line between defense and betrayal dissolved into mist. What would you call it? National security or human experimentation? And how many more stories like this lie beneath the sea, waiting for history to remember? What are your thoughts on the U.S. government's secret tests on its own soldiers? Please share your opinion in the comments.